Try to imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Total protonic reversal.
Protonic reversal.
Protonic Reversal with your host, Conan Neutron. Broadcasting from a secret underground lair in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
A gigantic middle finger to everything that is rotten about music, rock and roll, and corporate power.
The thing is, though, if you don't laugh, you're going to go on a killing spree with sharpened nails.
Confidence of a hero or a fool. I wasn't exactly certain which.
Could not be more professional.
It's only one I choose to devote my life to. That's okay.
It means something. It means something.
And take that away.
You know, that's my take on it. What's yours?
Protonic Reversal.
That's like a science thing, right?
It's a science thing, it's a science place, it's a scientific fact that we are all up in your face. It is time once again for the one, the only Protonic Reversal. Welcome to it, and also welcome to it. Tonight, hell of a guest, hell of a good time. Talented producer, engineer, musician, all-around awesome fella. Mr. Ken Andrews of Failure, Year the Rabbit, a very interesting YouTube, if you will, also. And I think that this is going to be good. I am your host, Conan Neutron. I'm a rock and roll lifer who has toured and recorded for over 22 years, most known for the band Conan Neutron, The Secret Friends. Music is a huge part of my life, and I use the format of this long-running podcast to talk about music with musicians whose work I enjoy and respect. Folks that may or may not be household names, but do something very special. This is episode 275. If this is your first time listening to the show, all of the archives are at protonicreversal.com and are always free. No ads, no sponsors, no kidding. If you'd like to support the show and get episodes sooner, you can give $1 a month to patreon.com/protonicreversal. If you like the show, or even just a single episode, please feel free to share it along, like, subscribe, or post a review. All of that helps people find the show, and it's just a darn nice thing to do. Ken, welcome to the show.
Hey, how's it going?
Fantastic, man. How are you?
I'm good.
This is technically, at the time of this recording, this is a release eve, depending on your time zone, I suppose. Maybe if you're in Bali or something, that's not the case. But release eve for the new Failure, right?
I see that a few people in Australia are already listening.
There you go. It's the internet in action. It works out well for everyone.
Yeah. Do I need to start video or?
If you want, I mean, there's a lot of video elements to it. It's not compulsory or anything along those lines. You know, if you're in a bathrobe or something, it's okay. You don't.
Oh no, I have my I'm in my YouTube channel clothes.
Arguably, you look far more professional than I do. I'm having green screen problems. Looks like I'm like de-resing into the next universe or something along those lines. Like, yeah, you look fantastic. I would lead with that for sure.
Okay.
So tell me. My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, on this new Failure record, is that this is atypical of a COVID release, if you will, because you guys actually got into a room to do this, like for a good amount of time, right? To work this record, which is fairly atypical in this day and age. Now, am I off base by saying that, or?
No, that's right. I mean, we got tested before we started doing it, and I think we maybe even got a test in the middle of doing it too. Yeah, it was before the vaccine, and but after there were tests. But I mean, the place was a ghost town, and it's like an eight room, you know, sort of like a larger touring act rehearsal / pre-production recording facility. It's a major facility, and we were the only artists there for the entire month.
Yeah, that's kind of nice.
It was awesome.
Okay. You don't have to hear anyone practicing their metal riffs or anything, you know, at top volume. Not that would ever happen in a practice place, of course.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, these places are actually, soundproof enough between the two spaces that you don't really hear anyone else, except when you go into the common areas or go get something from your car. So
Right.
it's pretty chill, except for the room we were in, which didn't have a ceiling on it for some reason. And it's so our writing sessions for that month were actually kind of blasting through that whole building of this facility. And but there was really not many people to hear it, like maybe a janitor to a security guard.
Did you did the did the fact that it was kind of isolated mean that, I mean, did sometimes like I always talk about to folks about how a studio can inform like a record, right? Like the kind of environment in the studio, the kind of for lack of a better term, not sound hippy dippy about it, but the vibe or something along those lines. So being in a case where you're in a place that always got a lot of things happening and it's fairly isolated, like does it feel like you're basically working out songs on the moon or something? I mean, what's the is it freeing, or is it just feel
that month was not particularly fun or enjoyable to me, which is strange because we got so much out of that time in the end, when we went back and listened to it after the fact. But during that time, it was not a good month for the world in general, and so that was weighing heavily on everybody.
Yeah.
And but I don't know, there was just some solace being together and kind of committing to this weird concept of not actually working on songs, but simply improvising without really saying anything. I don't think we hardly spoke about the music at all. Most of the time we were there, we were talking about what was going on in the world and what we were going to get for lunch.
So then if you're if you're recording all this stuff, are you listening back? Like, how do you are you going for like 8-hour sessions, or are you
Yeah,
back to it like later on? And
way after it. I mean, there were a couple things that we may have played back. I didn't really want to hear too much of it. I just kind of wanted to just do it and evaluate it later. And that's basically what happened. So in fact, I did another gig in between listening to it and finishing the last day there recording it, and which was awesome, which was it was so good for me to kind of clear my palate and then come back to it and realize, wow, there's actually a bunch of really cool things that didn't seem cool when they went down.
Well, yeah, if you guys are jamming things out, right? Like you're ideally there's only so much listening you can do without taking yourself out of the moment. Yeah, and I'm sure it could be the kind of situation where maybe something that didn't even make a wave at the time, you're like, oh, hey, that's cool. Like what's that all about? That's interesting. But again, as someone that works with his ears, to be like involved in every part of the process like that, how do you find the clarity just to separate it out? It seems like the editing is going to be the hardest thing, right? Especially if you're just doing hours and hours at a time.
It's funny. I do think of myself maybe in a way almost primarily an editor. I went to film school, and before I graduated, I was working as an editor in Hollywood. I was actually the staff video editor for Atlantic Records for like, I don't know, 4 months while I was in college.
Yeah.
And so like editing, whether it be visuals or music, it just kind of comes second nature to me. And it's always been that way. So it doesn't seem that odd to me, but I can see, like, zoomed out, it's like wait, how's that guy like evaluating his own stuff all the time?
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah.
It's a little weird. I don't know. That's just how it's been since I first started playing guitar, really. I kind of went down the path of trying to be more of a songwriter than a really good guitar player.
Right.
And so I was overdubbing on top of myself, like way before I ever really should have.
Yeah.
I should have just practiced for a few more years. So that part of it it's all one thing to me. I think for a lot of guitar players that I meet, they're like, I was a guitar player and then I became a producer. For me, I was like kind of doing both things at the beginning.
Do you think you started off when you started playing guitar, it was with the intent of writing songs, or did you have any intent at all other than playing guitar, maybe? And the reason I ask, because I feel like some people would kind of start with more like, I call it academic decathlon shredding versus picking up the guitar to write songs, kind of approach things a little bit differently.
Yeah, the like the fast playing stuff never really, it never grabbed me. So I never desired to really go down that path. I didn't know what path I wanted to go down in the first few days I was playing guitar. I was just doing it to see what would happen and if I would like it at all. Yeah. But what I did notice pretty quickly, maybe in the first third, fourth, or fifth week, I really wanted to overdub on top of myself, which is weird. I think if you can barely play a chord progression,
right?
And I could play a couple chord progressions, and the first thing I'm thinking is, I'm going to do another part on top of that, like right now.
And to be clear, this is probably before there was any sort of looping technology, like a looping pedal or anything that you could really do that with appreciably, right?
No, the technology of the time for that application was cassette 4-track.
Right. And you record it, and then you like just do a new track over that, and so on. And then eventually the original, if you do it too much, the original kind of just disappears underneath it.
Yeah, I mean, well, if you do the sort of what do they call it? The mixing down trick, where you like if you have 4 mono tracks, you fill up 3, you mix those down to the 4th track, then you've got 3 blank tracks again, and you kind of keep doing that. But what you notice is the very first tracks that you did sound kind of dull compared to the last tracks you did in that mode of recording, which is kind of cool. It teaches you engineering a little bit, like, oh, I might want to brighten this a little bit before we print it back.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, it was an aesthetic, especially within the 90s, right? That having the sort of, I don't know whether it would be like degradation or compression or what it would be, but there was a certain aesthetic that kind of that was part of it. And I think
it was definitely part of it for me. I was heavily involved in 4-track cassette recording for years. And what is interesting is just recently on this album, we were finishing some drum tracks for this album at Dave Grohl's studio, Studio 606, and I was kind of just perusing some of the back rooms, just kind of seeing what gadgets might be there, and I came upon a 4-track, a cassette 4-track. I think it was actually the 8-track version, which we also had at the very end there, before we went into the world of ADATs. And that's when I learned, because one of the assistants walked up and was just noticing that I was staring at this machine, and he's like, "Oh yeah, that Dave made the whole first Foo Fighters record on that machine."
Oh, how funny! Like that, the one where he like play, that first one, the self-titled one, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's he played everything or mostly everything, but it also had a really kind of weird sound and kind of like not super hi-fi sound to it. And I knew that when I first heard it in the 90s.
Mhm.
So, but I didn't know it was cassette. But I kind of thought it was something messed up, maybe 8-track reel to reel, or just like home version of that kind of. It just had a weird character. And then finding out it was actually 8-track audio cassette. Fidelity of an 8-track audio cassette, each individual track, pretty low.
Right.
Because they're so thin. So thin.
And I think of that just as almost like, songwriting aesthetic. We think of something like, I think Guided by Voices is a good example of this, where you can almost like imagine like an arena rock style presentation, but it's just, but you can't quite hear it because that spectrum's cut off. So it like lets the imagination fill it in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an aesthetic that I don't think you can quite, it's not exactly the same with digital recording for sure. And by no means am I an analog fetishist in any way, shape, or form, nor do I know you are. And I don't necessarily want to waste time talking about that when there's so much else to talk about. But I mean, it's the tools, it's the technology. Use the technology, right? That's. Would you say that's a Ken aesthetic for recording?
Play with toys and make sound for sure. Like analog, digital, whatever.
I think it's pretty notable that like the especially came to knowledge with most folks with failure, but the sound, the interplay of the sound and how things fit together, like the layering with the songs, it seems like there's so much thought behind it and there's so much intent behind it. What kind of before you started playing guitar, like what kind of bands were you listening to? Were you like more of a punk rock guy at first? You were into Pink Floyd? Like what were the bands that kind of made you like, oh, that's interesting?
I had affairs with both of those things, Floyd and punk and new wave and certain hard rock things, Van Halen, AC/DC. I mean, all of it basically. But I would say on this newest record, I think I was really kind of going back to my long affair with Robert Smith and The Cure.
It's funny you say that because that's actually something I thought of, and it isn't necessarily because it doesn't necessarily have all the like sonic hallmarks of what you might associate. Because what would that mean, right? I mean, it's standing on the beach and the mid-period stuff and like the later it much like many brilliant bands, there's different eras of it, but it is the way things kind of fit together. Is like, oh, it almost reminds me of like that kind of Cure style thing without explicitly sounding like the Cure, which not a lot of bands can pull off. So kudos for that.
Yeah, thanks.
So is there, and again, knowing that you're coming from basically jamming might not be the right word, but you're putting these songs together from, as you said, improv, right? Everyone's like, you got players that know exactly how everyone plays, but are very thoughtful and open to trying new things. And you have the ability to record all of it and back to it, right? So where do you decide, like, enough's enough? Like if it's something where, hey, that's good where it is, stop, that needs another thing. Like, and again, maybe this comes easier for you as a producer and engineer to think that way, again, even with your own stuff. But are you able to kill the baby if that needs to happen? I guess is the better way to put it.
Oh, we killed a lot of babies on this record. I mean, there's so many things that aren't on this record from the August 2020 sessions. I mean, the 3 weeks that we did there, I think it was like 15 or 16 days, ended up being about 36 hours straight of just music. Like that's removing all the dead air.
Wow.
So and strictly like nothing really lasts longer than a minute or two. There's a few times where we explore two parts next to each other, or alternating between two parts, but it's mostly just trying to find like just just weird combinations or just, interesting things that just catch our ear. But the thing of it is I didn't realize that like improving every day like that for so long was going to be so fatiguing and so kind of depressing, actually.
Oh, funny. Okay. How so? How do you mean? So like just
because you're not completing anything.
I get you. Okay.
But that was part of the experiment, is to not get bogged down in the arranging. And really to break the record up into two sort of creative pieces, the improving and then the editorial slash filling out the songs. I mean, filling out is a little weak of a phrase, because sometimes we were taking 2 bars and spinning that into a whole song. So really we only had one part. So there was a lot of full-on writing and composition happening in the second phase. It's just that we had all these like musical moments, musical nuggets to go back and reference and pull from.
Yeah, it almost seems like it's panning for gold to a certain degree.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Because what we ended up doing is taking that 36 hours and whittling it down to about 3 hours. And then we whittled it down to about 25 ideas.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. So again, it seems like all the heavy lifting is going to be in the listening back and in the editing and making those kind of decisions of like what justifies exploration and retention almost.
Well, I mean, the reality is just when you're creating that much raw material, you could basically double whatever time you spent creating it, at least double editing it or exploring it, whatever you want to call. So, we were there for 3 weeks straight. Actually ended up taking close to 3 months to condense that down to a 20 or 30 piece highlights tape, essentially.
Right. Yeah. And do you feel so is this a unique way for failure to write, because it is a unique sounding record, and especially I think any record that comes out around now is going to be unique in some fashion or capacity, maybe in ways that we intrinsically don't understand right now. But as far as the creative process for that band, was this a relatively new method of working or
no?
Okay.
The only thing that was new about it is that we did the improving was like double what we've done before, and that's basically it. I mean, we had done it on Fantastic Planet, but the volume was way lower, way smaller, like maybe 2-4 days worth of stuff to go through. And then we did it a little bit on The Heart is a Monster as well. But mostly we just never said, okay, let's just go in and only do this for 3 weeks.
Yeah. I mean, it's a commitment, right?
It's a commitment, like kind of like an experiment.
Yeah. I mean, I think some folks could pull it off and have a great time. And I think some folks, it could be a nightmare. And maybe the same people at different times of that time period, depending on how it goes. Like, did you ever feel like you were getting kind of, I don't know, like Heart of Darkness about it? Like getting like,
yeah. Or just losing myself in the fatigue of trying to, because essentially you're trying to write something, you're trying to create something on the spot, reacting to 2 other people and what they're doing. And it's great, it's awesome. But after about 3 hours, it's like you start getting a little loopy.
Yeah.
But what we kind of found out is that last hour of each day was where the gold was.
Interesting.
We could almost all the best stuff that we all agreed was the more interesting stuff was stuff that almost none of us remembered playing.
Hey, that's pretty good. Who came up with that? That was you? Really?
No, seriously. Greg was like, who's playing guitar and who's playing bass? I do not remember. Like, I don't remember anything about this. So we were getting a little just kind of punch drunk, you know?
Imagine so, yes. Yeah.
But still recording.
That's beautiful. I mean, like that's such a unique way of creating that, you know, to a certain degree, I could almost see it be more of a popular thing like in the 60s or something, other than the fact that you had tapes, right? Like you had you could play for as long as you had the tape for. So
yeah, you could, which wasn't that long, not as long as what we were doing. No, we were doing hours and hours, full multi-tracked.
Yeah.
And the result of that, having that level of technology at these improv sessions, is that a good 40% of the drums and probably the guitar as well are actually from those improv sessions.
That's awesome. So it's basically the structure of the building is there, right?
In several cases, the bones were so good from those improv sessions that we had trouble besting them, essentially.
Yeah, because the thing is, you don't want to do it just to do it, right? You want to do it if it's going to add something. You're going to like make a difference positively, not not take away from it or just do it for the sake of doing it, for sure. That is a Wild Type Droid.
Yeah.
What's you always have such interesting album titles with that band. Where's that story behind that?
I'm not sure, because that's a Greg composition there. So I have no answer for you on that.
Okay, that's fine. You don't have to.
Except I like it.
It's good. I mean,
yeah.
It catches the attention, and there's a beginning, middle, and end.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something to be said for all that. I think that's there's a lot. A name can do a lot, and in some cases, a name can do a lot of harm. So that.
Well, yeah, I did see some posts. People were saying, "You better watch out for Lucasfilm coming after you, or Disney, I guess, because you have the word droid in the title."
Come on, they don't own the word droid, do they? Really?
They have sued people for using the word droid.
Shut the front door. Wow.
They have, yes.
That is, well, there's a lot we could say about that, isn't there? But that's okay. Well, sure. That's if that's how you want to use your immense power and money. Okay. I'm sure that's protecting the brand somehow. Okay.
Yeah.
I wonder, just because there's so many folks that are so and I do want to talk more about the new record, because of course it comes out. So the best place to get it, certainly tomorrow at the time of this airing, 12/3, would be Bandcamp, right? Because it's Bandcamp Friday, so the artists get the entirety of the proceeds. But I do want to talk about the earlier records either, because I must say, like, I enjoy the records, but I don't have a lot of context for, like, what was your world like in '92, like when you started it with Comfort, like where were you coming from? Like you mentioned, like, doing the editing stuff and things along those lines, and coming from more of like a film background almost, right? So.
Yeah, I was directing hip hop music videos in '91 and '90, yeah, and signing with Failure to Slash Records at the same time. It was a weird time.
Well, and that was the gold. I call it the gold rush times, right? Because they let the freaks in for a minute. Basically.
Right then, with MTV and the explosion of hip hop, it was like, if you rapped, you got a deal, pretty much. I mean, so, and because MTV was so effective at selling CDs at that point in time, they wanted music videos for a ton of artists. So there were a lot of directors and production companies that were getting swamped with work. And I happened to be around at the right time at the right place. And actually, one of the directors that I had interned for while I was a junior in college saw one of my videos that I had done that actually was on MTV because of a contest. And they were like, hey, called me up and was like, hey, I got something I want to do with you. And I thought, oh, he's going to want me to do craft service again. That's basically what I had done the last time I had seen him.
Right. Oh, no, it's something different, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I call him. I'm like, hey, what's going on? He's like, hey, can you come in? We want to talk to you about this video. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, you direct the video. Silence. I'm just like,
right. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Be right there.
Yeah. Okay. That's a thumbs up.
Yeah.
And that so having a foot in that world, but then also, you're putting together these kind of droning kind of crazy, like almost like sci-fi soundscapey sounds, like in the songs that you're making in Failure at the time. Did it feel like it was coming from a different world, like being in that, or did you kind of just look at it like, oh, it's all just music, it's all music, I'm making video for this kind of music now, and I make a different kind of music and everything is cool?
No, I mean, I felt like what we were doing was not in the popular vernacular at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, we were playing like underground acid parties and stuff in Hollywood and Al's bar, and just like, just like shitty dive bars. And you got like $200 or $250 if you like sold it out, it was like,
yeah, exactly.
You might get some beer if no one came. But it was awesome. I mean, if you're in college and you're just doing that on Friday nights and maybe rehearsing like 3 nights a week or something, and occasionally working in music videos, I was having a good time. I was 22.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and that's what a time to be doing it too, because there was a lot of fantastic music being given a voice around that time too, and a lot of mediocre music as well, just like with anything. But it seemed like it was a good time to ply your trade, to put it mildly. Now I remember it's COVID time is such a weird time, but you remixed that record for the box set, the Comfort we're talking about now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, let's see, 92 to 2020.
And I think it was recorded in 91. I think. Yeah.
So that's charitably say that's a pretty long time. That's almost 30 years, right? So coming back to that, like, have you did it evoke any times of being there? Did it
especially soloing up some of the tracks, and hearing the room mics and stuff, and there's like there was a couple headers where you could hear us talking for a second before we started and stuff. So yeah, totally brought me back to that studio, Pachyderm, in Cannon Falls, Minnesota.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. A lot of great records made there. And then, what were you thinking of when you're thinking about the sound of that record? Because that's good. It's a very iconic record. Like the people that are fans of that record are really big fans. But it also, it sounds kind of its time. Like, do you think about it differently in terms of, hey, you don't want to. I think we already referenced with the droid thing, Star Wars. So remember George Lucas going back and dicking around with the
totally. That's exactly that was my exact first thought.
Yeah.
And how people, and even myself, was a little concerned about that. But at the same time, I've mixed like 100 albums between then, and it's just like the appeal for me was to just make the sound of that record match with the rest of the canon, basically, right?
Gotcha. Yeah.
And I didn't think it was going to be much of like an emotional exercise, and it wasn't. It ended up being there were some nostalgic moments, of course, like I just mentioned, but it was like, it's basically how I wanted it to sound back then, but I didn't know how to do that.
Yeah. So, I mean, did you kind of start in with like game face, like, okay, I'm going in to do the work and this just happens to be a thing. And then like suddenly you're time traveling. Is that sort of, sort of the crux of what that was like? Or is it just little moments?
No, I mean, every song, it was just like bringing back memories. And then I queued up I think when I was mixing Screen Man, I queued up some video footage, like high 8 VHS.
Wow, awesome.
Yeah. We had some camera that shot on that. And there is a really cool shot of me playing the solo in that, and I queued that up and kind of sunk it up, and I was just like, wow, that was fun. That was a fun day.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like that would have been for sure. And there's something to be said for, and it's funny to me that they have filters now, like Instagram filters and things that like emulate the
high 8 video. Yeah.
Video, yeah, right.
Yeah.
You have a thing that the world's first computer, like, the ones that fit in the room, it's like, 1,000 times more powerful than that, and you're using it to emulate older technology. And there's something to be said there, I guess. I don't know what it is, but it's always kind of makes me laugh. So that's comfort. And did it strike you, like, can you still hear it as music, like when you were going back and mixing it, like, or is it something where you only were hearing the experience?
No, I mean, I knew what it was. I've listened to that record a few times over the years. I mean, especially when we rebooted, that's when I really noticed it again.
Yeah.
Because we wanted to play some songs from there, and I hadn't heard it in a while. I put it on. I was like, whoa, this one sounds really different.
Right.
The rest. And then it also happened that we got access to those tapes.
Right.
So it wasn't something that I was like always wanted to do, and it finally happened. It was more like the opportunity presented itself. I took a swipe at it, and I liked. I maybe did 1 or 2 songs and just showed the band, and they were like, "This sounds awesome. Let's do it." So.
Yeah. Why wouldn't you? And that's okay. So that's and that box set, it was the first 3, right? It was a Comfort and Magnified and Fantastic Planet all kind of packaged together, right?
Correct.
So
with an oddities disc as well.
Yeah, with the
rarities or something.
Yeah, I was gonna say odds and sods, but it all amounts to the same, right?
Yeah.
So now Magnified, so that's a couple of years later, and Roberts, he leaves during the recording, right? And
he left before we started the recording for Magnified. Yeah.
And there's a lot of really cool things on that record. There's some like really cool, like bass driven stuff, harmonics, lots of, like, I think of that as a key usage of harmonics, like that, and like Big Black and things, as a songwriting tool, and like ability to, like, for hooks. So as a band, on that second record, you're kind of hitting a little harder, trying to dig like a little bit deeper. Slash was supportive of Failure at the time. Was it something where they were just like, everyone was kind of waiting for the next Nirvana? I remember.
Yeah, because that all happened right after they signed us.
Yeah.
And then, it was about to happen, and then it did happen. And so they were in the thick of their success with Nevermind when we were recording with Steve in Cannon Falls. And in fact, they were calling Steve while we were there, and he told us that.
Oh, wow.
Because they were already thinking of working with him for what would become In Utero, and they did in that very same studio.
I was going to say, I was going to mention it earlier, but not every reference to that has to be a Nirvana reference, but it does loom large on my mind. I love that.
Oh yeah, totally. Because I mean, that room has such a sound. When I was listening to those the Comfort multi-tracks, I was like, it's totally the In Utero drum sound too.
Yeah, I mean, it's got that iconic sound that without saying anything like it, I think of the was it Deep Purple that set up in the castle? I'm trying to, or was that Zeppelin? I'm trying to remember. But
well, I know U2 did it for Unforgettable Fire.
Yeah, indeed. But not that it has a castle sound, but just has a sound. They're like, oh, I know. That's once you know recording, you can spot that drum sound, right?
Yeah, it's a cool room. It had huge picture windows, like 8x8 windows that looked right out into the woods. And so when you worked there during the day, you didn't feel like you were cooped up in like a cave like most studios.
Well, and there's something that it changes the vibe, right? When you're not around your familiar environment and your familiar distractions and responsibilities, and you're at a place and you're recording.
The best thing about having so many windows in a studio is that your body tracks the time of day.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Yeah, that's a good point, because you're gonna.
That's the problem with studios is you go in the morning and you don't come out until it's night. And so your body doesn't get to experience sunset and the darkening of the sky, and it screws up your sleep.
Yeah, and you end up like your circadian rhythms end up being on like recording time, starting at noon and going till like 2 or something,
Yeah, you get into that loop of, never getting enough sleep, and you move into this sort of like studio zombie mode.
Yeah, and that's interesting. So yeah, having the natural light and everything is gonna, that's gonna inform it. It's gonna hit a little different, and that's interesting. I have never thought about that. That's pretty fun.
It was really different because you see the light changing like all day. It's just that's informing, because when it does get dark, it's like, okay, yeah, it's dark now. Yeah. Where most studios don't have windows.
Yeah,
they just don't.
It's true. That is very notable. Yeah. So this, again, going back to just to the songs on Magnified, like it kind of seems like there was like it's a little more poppy, right there was you're trying
a lot more melodic, a lot more, this is the beginning of the shift of it being more of my songwriting to more of the duo of me and Greg writing everything together.
Yeah, sure. Because it seems like you're kind of like locking onto a thing that you are exploring, and it's hitting a little deeper, right? And at that point you've been playing together for a while at this point, so
but we haven't. Here's the thing that happened on Magnified is that I kind of discovered how deep Greg's talent really was. I was just like, I hadn't had time to really appreciate it because we were working on the early songs that I had kind of come up with to kind of get the ball rolling, and have like a 30-minute set of music that we could play live. But after we made that first record and we started actually working on writing songs, it was like, whoa, this guy's an awesome guitar player.
Yeah, you're like, no, this guy's got it. This
like, what the hell? Yeah. Like, I mean, I'd seen him play guitar a little bit before that, but it was like, whoa, okay, so that's cool.
Yeah,
and that's when the switching really started, basically. switching instruments.
Yeah, and so and it all seems very deliberate on that record too. Like it all seems like focused. Not that it didn't before, but considering like what came afterwards, it's like I actually did not hear that record when I came out. I heard Fantastic Planet, and then I heard that one, and then I was like, oh, this makes more sense. And to me, it was sort of like weirdly, I did the same thing with Radiohead. I didn't hear the Bends until after I heard OK Computer, and I was like, oh, okay.
I think a lot of people, you're not alone on that one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I remember like, I was at that band with that one song. Yeah, whatever, it's fine. And then it's like, wait, is this a different band? Is this the same guys? Like what?
Yeah.
What happened?
Yeah.
So then that keys up Fantastic Planet. I actually had the rare, I don't know if it's going to say privilege of working at a record store when that came out. And for a certain type of music fan, that was a big deal of a record. That said, you know, it as far as its influence and how it's talked about now, I don't know if that really got over commercially necessarily, but I think its legacy seems cemented in history as, you know, one of a pretty great record. So I mean, can you tell me a little bit about that record and just
a great record that sold like 100,000 copies when it came out.
Well, it's okay for you to say it. I didn't want to.
Yeah, no, that's. I was just, you know, summarizing your summary basically.
Yeah, it's a much more succinct way of putting it. But
yeah, I mean, we didn't break. We've never really broken big. What we have is some kind of fan base that's really loyal and really I don't know, interested. They come to the shows. We interact with them. I don't know. It's just it's a cool vibe.
So
and it kind of operates outside of what I kind of work in my day job, the regular label industry.
Yeah, and that's okay. So how so? How do you mean? So can you speak a little more to that?
Well, because we're not on a label and we don't have a team of managers and A&R people and stuff guiding the process. It's just us and our fans,
right?
You know what I mean?
Exactly.
That's it.
But these days there are things like Bandcamp that allow the artist fan relationship to be, you know, closer than ever, but also kind of deny maybe more larger opportunities at widespread connection with the world at large because of just your volume of everything, right? Like
I know,
good, bad, and indifferent. I
know there's a lot of people I really respect are calling for artists to not put their music on Spotify. And
I saw some of that today. Yeah.
And we're on Spotify.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm 100% ambivalent about being on Spotify. I have argued against it in band meetings many, many times, but ultimately I agreed. It's a really, there's no good choice. There's no good choice. You know, it's people listening. People are going to hear your music more if you're on Spotify, period. Which is the way it is. More people will hear your music.
It's almost, I don't know if you're a Star Trek fan or not, but there's that concept, the Kobayashi Maru, like this test where basically the key to it is that there's no way to win. So you just had to figure out how not to lose.
or how to die, actually.
Yeah, exactly. What's the best way? Yeah.
To go out.
Right. Which I think is amazing. And I maybe overutilize that term when it comes to music for what I can only assume is obvious reasons these days. But like, you're writing a manifesto in the woods if you're not on it. You know, because that's what people are using for music now. And it was something else before. Maybe it'll be something different in 5 years. Okay, fine. But if you look at it like, well, that's what used to be where radio was. Maybe then it doesn't like hurt so much. That said, I mean, it is nice that there are services like Bandcamp, you know, that can kind of make an event out of hey, this is the day that we're going to buy music, everybody. And I think that's nice. There's something to be said for that.
Yeah, I'm really excited about being on Bandcamp right now.
So just if you may, I'm going to get murderized if I don't talk a little bit about Fantastic Planet to you, because that is, and I'm sure you've talked about it a million times, and maybe it's not the most interesting, but I think there's such a key toward the ear towards like atmospherics, and that's also when the segues, right? The different segues kind of came in, which kind of became like a failure hallmark.
We had them on Magnified.
Had them on Magnified,
but they got better.
Yeah.
On Fantastic Planet, and maybe a little bit more of them. Yeah. And
so that record, how long did it take you for that one to make? Was that a long recording process?
Well, Fantastic Planet was like, instead of like doing the improv and then going in the studio and putting it all together, we moved into a house. We rented a house, bought a bunch of equipment, and lived in it together, all three of us in this little house, and just made music every day. And so if you include the fact that we had no songs when we moved in to the house, we finished the record, I believe it was 5.5 months later. So that includes the writing, arranging, performing, mixing, everything.
God, and that's so immersive, and it's interesting because the main themes seem to be, involving isolation, whether it's like the comfort of it or the discomfort therein. So it's interesting that to be in such an immersive experience for that, along with the natural outer space and science fiction imagery and so on and so on. Do you find that, and again, to me, that's one of the records that the legend has only grown. Like I think of, Leaves Turn Inside You by Unwound is another one, right? Where people just find it every year and they kind of get lost in it and they get psyched about it. Meanwhile, like you're making music and you're still doing other things and people keep coming back to this record. Is it something where, was that surprising? Did you kind of have an idea that you were making something really special at the time? Was it just another day at the office or house, so to speak? Like,
no, it definitely wasn't another day at the office. It was, we were there for a while. I remember it being pretty dramatic when it was happening. Like there was a lot of arguing. There was a lot of high points where we feel like we really nailed something or achieved something we hadn't before. There was a lot of substance abuse. There was like everything under the sun happened while we made that record there.
Yeah, and that it's sort of like it runs the gamut, right? Like it's got all the things.
Well, I just wonder, because we've never really camped out together except when we're on tour, but we're not really writing on tour when you're shoved in the bus together for a long time. But we've never really lived with each other since Fantastic Planet in terms of the writing, like the writing bubble, I guess.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea with that was that like you would kind of get it together, like record and produce a song and then kind of move on to like the next piece of it and sort of almost like assembly line it, right?
Yep.
Yeah,
that's a very, very unorthodox way, especially then. Then it was very regimented. Like you had songwriting with the bands, then when they had enough songs, you would go into pre-production with a producer, which was a rehearsal space usually, and you might have like a cassette recorder, and you'd really fine-tune some arrangements. Then you'd go into the studio, and the idea is you're so rehearsed that you can get in and get out quickly.
Absolutely.
To save money. And our whole idea was to completely abandon that model and turn the studio into like a creative home or a creative space, basically, where you just lived there until it was done, artistically done.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, you're basically at like song camp to a certain degree, right? Because you're immersed in it. It's all around you all the time.
Yeah, and there's something about that, this kind of living it every day, where you're just like, I think it pushes you to try, experiment more, and get weird with recording techniques, and because the truth is that the per day cost was so low because we had bought the equipment ahead of time, that we could afford to stay there, basically.
Right. Right. Yeah, exactly. Because you don't have the overhead for, paying on the day by day of a studio or something. You have the stuff.
Well, a proper studio at the time was going for $2,200 a day. We were paying less in rent for that house per month.
Yeah, that's wild.
So, and we could live there, which, by the way, was a big deal for us back then, because we were all basically homeless.
I was gonna say you probably didn't have anywhere else to be, right? Because
I so much of my 20s in LA, I didn't have an apartment at all.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, do you think that informed, the writing process, like, that kind of like spatial disassociation and feeling like unmoored from what most people consider reality in day-to-day life?
Yes. Exactly. It's kind of like those improvs we did in August 2020. You get to the point where you're so fatigued that it's like something kind of unlocks.
Yeah.
And it just pours out. It's just like you've been basically kind of holding it back or something emotionally or something. And then you're just, you give up. And I remember Greg saying something or referencing something that Stanley Kubrick said about working with actors in front of the camera and doing multiple takes. And he said something to the effect of, usually there might be some good things in the first 3 takes. Then after that, you have to go for a long time, but basically before you break the actor down. And they just give up, essentially.
Right.
And they start doing weird stuff and unexpected stuff. And then you get to the really good stuff, is what his theory was. So, because he was notorious for doing 30 or 40, 50 takes.
Yeah. I think Shelley Duvall maybe got the maybe the worst of that treatment during The Shining, and it led to, it's a great movie, but was it very fun for her to do? I don't know, maybe not.
Yeah.
But it's a great film. I mean,
yeah,
argue with that. So just back to Fantastic Planet, was the idea, so it feels like you're in like a cyclical environment making this record, writing the songs and recording them, then kind of moving to the next one. I think it's interesting to me that there's that the chiming sound at the end of Daylight that also starts Saturday Savior, right?
Yes.
So,
yeah.
where did that come into play? Was that just like hey, this would be fun to do, or did you have that idea like thematically early on?
We had the idea to expand on segues.
Yeah.
Early on, like we had done them on the prior record, but they didn't, they just weren't that great. They were just more like sketches. Mm-hmm. And we decided we wanted to have instrumental pieces on Fantastic Planet. So we were working on those in the middle of the songs as well. I'm not sure. I think though the music box came in towards the end when we were really starting to think about the sequence. We already had a lot of the segues recorded. We had a lot of the songs recorded. We were finishing up things. And now we're starting to think like, what are we going to do with all this? My original thought was that it was going to be nowhere near as long as it is. I thought we were going to leave off 4 or 5 of those songs and have a more succinct, 40-minute record.
Not at all.
And that's not what happened, because Greg came in with a sequence and he was just like, this is it. Just that cocky, like, I know this is good because I heard it, and I queued it up and sort of assembled it on the tapes, and it was like, yeah, this is good. This is really good.
Yeah, it's almost, it's almost a buy the ticket, take the ride situation, right? It's like,
Mm-hmm.
Talking of Kubrick, 2001 starts very differently than it ends. And you go on a ride for the whole thing.
I think, the record really reflects those 5 or 6 months that we were there also, even though the songs don't always appear in the order that we recorded them. There's still, it's like you can hear the journey we went on. I can, it's like and that's why I think it almost feels like there's movements in the sequence.
Yeah, definitely. So, and it's actually, I think, a very apt named record because it feels like a journey to a place, right? So there's these like soundtrack style movements where it's sort of like, oh, what is this? What movie is this from? And it's like, no,
Mm-hmm.
not from a movie. This is part of this record. Like, oh, okay, cool. And I think that's attempted by a lot of different bands, but I think that record did what it was meant to do, and despite only selling 100,000 at the time, like it means a lot to people. Like now, even like an entire new generation of people have like discovered that record. Some of them through the much discussed Spotify.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they're listening to music, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's I'm never going to be mad about that. Like how would you ever be mad about that?
Pretty hard to be mad about that.
So then so after Fantastic Planet, when does stuff kind of start to break down? Is it already kind of like coming apart then, or?
Yeah, it's, to me, it's really, it had probably already started. But the thing that put it over the edge is when we actually finished Fantastic Planet, and we were booking I was calling our manager to book a mastering date, because they had called me the week before and said, hey, let's book the mastering date next week. Okay, so I'm calling him, and the manager gets on the phone and he's like, hey, I got some bad news. I go, what? He's like, you don't really have a label to turn this album into. It's just like, yeah, another long pause.
Yeah, very different from the other one earlier on.
Yeah, very different. But yeah, it was, they were trying to sell Slash, the 2 owners, and they basically put everyone's release schedule on hold by doing that.
Man, and it's not that it's a unique story, but it's just such a bummer. Like even secondhand, it's so devastating to. I mean, can you think of anything else that would like take the wind out of the sails quicker than, hey, we made this great thing, and yeah,
it took an emotional toll for sure, because you when you're about to deliver something that you feel is like you put everything into it, like. And then to have it sat for 1.5 years in limbo.
Yeah, and you're sitting here like, hey, we made our Dark Side of the Moon, we made our In Utero, and then it's like, okay, well, huh?
Maybe you did. I don't know. Yeah, right? Like, who knows? It's sitting on a shelf.
And it's now more of a concept and an idea than anything else. But then it does get to the world at large eventually, though, and it doesn't do numbers the way that it maybe could have. But also things were starting to change around that. And that was like 96, right? So that's sort of like,
I mean, if you do 100,000
that'd be amazing
in physical sales right now, you would be you'd be doing really good.
Yeah,
but
like,
back then, the almost baseline right around that time was gold.
right, yeah,
Right, bands were selling 100,000 and more, and not getting picked up for after that.
Yeah.
I mean, we actually were asked by Warner Brothers to make a fourth record, but we broke up before we could do that.
It is amazing to think of, and I'm certainly not going to mention any names, but like the bands that had like gold records during that time period was like, really? And
Mm-hmm.
you know, it was just easy. It just, hey, you had to buy it. You had to buy it if you wanted.
Buying CDs was, man, wow, what a money train that was.
So okay, so after Failure Packs It In, the legend kind of grows for a while sustainably. Nerds, charitably, I count myself amongst those, so I don't use that as an admonishment. Are into the band, find the record, connect with it. Meanwhile, you've moved on to other things. You're doing other things. You're a human being. You are a creative person. You're recording bands. I mean, I remember you did that when you worked with Creeper Lagoon. I remember that specifically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Bay Area originally. And I mean, did you feel after Failure kind of after the gas ran out of the car, so to speak, did you think that like, okay, well, I never want to do it at that level really again? Or did you have any sort of fatalistic ideas about music, or was it just sort of like, well, lick my wounds and figure out what's next?
No, I got back into being an artist pretty quickly after Failure broke up in '97. I mean, I started demoing songs for what would become the On record maybe 6 months after we broke up. Just kind of like, I was just kind of a zombie there for a few months. And some of my friends were calling me and saying, hey, let's do a band. And so I was also considering that, because there were some other pretty cool musicians who were like wanting to join forces. So no, I got back into the artist thing because I was into it. And yeah, I don't know what to say other than like my story with the record label world as an artist myself has been kind of, not so good.
Yeah.
So, plenty of artists that I've worked for or with haven't had that same experience. So I'm not trying to, say that's the only way things happen, but that's the way it broke down for me. Yeah. So I've had these troughs in my artist career where I'm like, I swear it off, basically. I'm like, I don't want to do that shit anymore. That's like, it's like you're basically, you're being a glutton for punishment. Why not just work for other bands and get to do what you like to do, which is make music in the studio or mix music in the studio. That's what I really do like to do the most in general. So I'd do that for a couple years, and then I'd be like writing a song. I'd find myself writing a damn song again, and then it's like friends like, hey, let's do a band, let's do a rock band, and then all of a sudden You're the Rabbit happens. And
with Tim Dow and Jeff from National Skyline, right? And
right,
yeah, and that's I mean that On record's cool. It's like definitely coming from more electronic aspect of things, but it's it's not like you forget how to make music just because you've had your dick kicked in the dirt, right?
No. It's been like this, almost like this unwilling but can't say no, kind of thing for me, where I'm like, really, can't you just play the song by yourself? like just don't record it. Just don't.
Just once more into the breach.
Yeah, really. But that's what makes the Failure reboot so different, is that we just didn't really consider. I mean, we had some offers, but we were just like, how could this ever make sense? You know, it was so much more fun doing it this way. And it's been a completely different experience for me as an artist to do it this way. It's so much more rewarding, basically.
Yeah, because that was what, 2013, right? And so
14, yeah.
2014. Okay, so it's you're coming at it from a different place in your life. You know, the records have had their time in the world. The records have not stopped being the records, and you know, people have a relationship to them. So it almost seemed like as a thing, like, hey, you know, let's do this if we can do it right. And then, you know, the fans that maybe never got a chance to see it, didn't know about it, you know, whatever, they now can do this, and we can just do something cool. Like, it seemed like it was done from the love of the game, for lack of a better term, is from the outside perspective.
I've said this a couple times in the press, but I don't think a lot of people really know this, is that when Greg and I sort of rekindled our friendship in like 2008, we had, as we evolved into talking about working together musically, one of the things we said, was if we're going to do Failure, I don't just want to do a comeback tour.
Yeah, a reenactment or whatever, right?
Yeah, I want to do, if we're going to do it, I want to come back with new music and do it, like, just pick up like we never left off, basically. And so, okay, well, if that's your idea, then we better see if we still have the capability of writing together and writing music that we like, that we both like. And so we actually spent a few weeks, I'm not sure how long it was, but we wrote maybe 2 or 3 of the songs that ended up on The Heart is a Monster before we actually booked that El Rey show.
Interesting. And was it kind of an instantaneous, everything clicking back in place, or was there sort of a feeling out period of like, oh, I don't know, like how quick did it come together?
There was a little bit of a hiccup at the beginning, because both he and I had really gone in a bunch of different musical directions since 97, and our kind of like musical, how would you say, our musical bearings, where we were at the time, was not that Failure-esque in a way, where we each were, you know, like, sort of, but not exactly. So what ended up happening in the first few jams, or not really jams, more like collaborations in my studio, didn't sound very Failure. It sounded more electronic. It sounded more experimental electronic, actually. And it was cool, and I liked it. And for a second, I thought, oh, this is going to be like a new thing.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah, it doesn't have to be saddled with the name and the history necessarily.
Exactly. It was different enough to where it would have been weird, I thought, if we would have kept the same name. And, you know, we went down that path a little bit longer, and then it was like, it just fizzled out naturally. And, you know, I started coming up with some riffs that were a little bit more in line with the Failure ethos, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And then we got a couple songs going that did end up on The Heart is a Monster, and we finished them. We're very close to being finished. And I think for us, it meant that we could, it was like flexing a muscle, you know,
Yeah,
like it's like, okay, we could still do this together. We knew we could do stuff apart because we were already doing that. He was doing Autolux and I was doing solo records and producing people and whatnot. But we still kind of had that thing when it came to the, you know, riffing together.
Yeah. Something special happening, something that's you know, greater than the sum of its constituent parts almost, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and good on you for recognizing that too. You know, I think.
Yeah, I felt more comfortable about doing a show at that point because I knew, well, if we wanted to go through with it and come back and make new music, the music won't suck, you know.
which should be something a lot more people think about, frankly. But yeah,
that was super important to me. Like, I did not want to be the butt of a joke, you know.
yeah, exactly.
Especially because we felt like, and Greg too, we kind of went out on a creative high note in '97. We didn't really plan to break up then or anything like that, but like when it did end, it was a good place creatively speaking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's, man, it's hard to motivate to put a capstone on it when you already are in a place where it ended just fine. Like, we ended on our best work, and you have that potentially haunting you in your head of like, well, is this as good as that or whatever? And like, you know, competing with yourself to a certain degree. I mean, did you find it easy to let that stuff kind of go, or is that just, you know, because just, I mean, time helps with that, I know. So
I think I went kind of, it ebbed and flowed for me, because that was also like a 5-6 month effort making that record, The Hardest Monster. And yeah, there were definitely moments of high insecurity where we were deep in and I was just like, what? This sucks. Like, I want to go home right now.
yeah, I mean, you get, again, you know, that's the problem with doing that Heart of Darkness style journey, right? You lose perspective, and the mind.
And that studio had no windows. That place was, I mean, it was convenient and it sounded good, but man, you really lost touch with reality or time when you were in there.
Yeah.
Even when you went out to the hallway, there was no windows. Like, it was like, yeah, it was
bunker.
It was a bunker. Also, the walls and the ceiling were 2 feet thick of concrete.
Man, really?
It was where.
Okay.
Yeah, it was made in the 70s by Warner Brothers for Foley recording.
No kidding. Wow.
Yes. So there's like a Foley pit. There was a Foley pit there where they could put water and it had a drain and stuff. And so, but Foley recording,
stairs, you know.
Yeah. But you have to, that stuff has to be super quiet.
Mm-hmm.
Super quiet, because sometimes you have to turn up the mic just to get the little quiet sounds they're trying to make, you know,
doing celery or something.
And that studio was right in the takeoff path of Burbank Airport.
Wow.
But you wouldn't know it when you were in this building. It was crazy.
Yeah, I guess you got to invest a little in soundproofing if you're going to be set up shop by the airport. Although as far as airports go, Burbank is you know, it's in a mall. Right? Yeah, it's pretty chill for an airport, which is not saying much, but you know, it's like LAX would definitely be more I mean, that's just like,
yeah, they can't land 747s in Burbank.
yeah, exactly. It's a smaller airport. To give context for the listener and the viewers, it's a smaller airport. So then, okay, so Heart is a Monster. Troy, who we haven't mentioned yet, he contributes a couple of tracks. He ends up playing on the shows. Troy's a busy guy, though. Was there ever, like, when do you get to the point of, hey, is Troy going to be involved with this or not? Or, you know? Yeah,
I mean, that was that question was answered pretty early on. No, you know, because he was he was in a band that was touring all the time. Then
Troy was doing okay. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was more like can you carve out some time for us?
Yeah. So you got
And
a period in this 9-month window that I can do something. Oh, okay. Well, that's not gonna, that's not gonna be enough or something.
yeah, basically, yeah. He did one tour and played on some songs. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to me that like the the failure the failure cinematic universe, there's so many tendrils that spread out to so many interesting bands, none of which really sound like each other.
Mm-hmm.
All the different, I think that's probably one of the most unique things about the band's legacy is that it's almost the playing or the style or the feel is recognizable, but it comes off in completely different ways with the different outfits. It's pretty interesting, and I think that's that's a as good of musical legacy as the records itself to a certain degree. That like it's recognizable in its way if you know where to look for that. And I think that comes across differently, of course, for the different players, but it is notable. At least to me, it is.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah, that was more just the commentary than a question, really.
Totally.
So, look, we haven't talked. We talked at the beginning about the new record. I want people to pick that up for sure. Everyone should pick that up, specifically on Bandcamp. But I want to talk about the solo record last year too. I want to be mindful of your time as well. But I think that's an interesting record, and I think it would be disingenuous not to talk about that. I noticed that the video, the video is great. I got
a Trump video with David. Yeah.
I think that did you have an idea in mind for that record, like conceptually, or was that just a writing songs and like, oh, I wrote enough songs, I like these, let's make a record?
I wrote that stuff just before we went into the studio in August 2020. Okay. So at that point I was kind of just chomping to start working. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't going to work out to do the August thing until August. So I just got busy doing. I didn't even know if I was just going to do like one or two songs, just do like a single or whatever. But in the end, the EP thing kind of felt right. And then just kind of with the election coming and everything, it was like,
yeah.
I don't know. Strange situations make people do strange things or unusual things. And when I was writing that song, it was the only time I've ever written a song where I saw the video as I was writing the song. And
okay, cool.
Yeah, I was just like, it was a video song to me in a way. Like I couldn't separate the two in my head. And as I just called my friend David and I was like, look, have you ever worn the prosthetic makeup stuff? And he's like, a little bit for like wounds and stuff. Why? What are you talking about? And then I sent him some photos about what I was talking about. And he was like, I see. Okay. Okay. Let's do this. And like, we pulled that together in a week. It was crazy.
Wow. Okay. So that, because it's got a very different feel. Like it's not like, not that it's like, ska songs or something along those lines. It's definitely, it's got the moodiness that one would expect to a certain degree, if moodiness could be applied to music. But it's just interesting. It seems very free, almost like just, like, hey, we're doing a thing, and this is the thing, and it's funny you mentioned the video came early on, because the video does seem kind of inextricably linked to the record to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. That EP and that video, it's a 3-month period basically for me, where and it expresses everything that I was kind of feeling at the time.
It does.
It wasn't very planned out. I didn't get, hey, it's time to make a new Ken Andrews solo record. It was like I had some downtime in between mix gigs, and I just really felt like writing and saying something, and I just, I didn't overthink it too much. I just kind of did it.
It is crazy to think about that time period in history, which it now is in history, and like how on the brink everything felt on a day-to-day basis. And not that everything's like relaxed now. Don't get me wrong. We got entirely new problems, but that was very crazy time. And I don't know. It's been interesting to hear the art that comes out of it. But I think it's a good EP. So let's talk Wild Type Droid. I want to be mindful of your time. I kind of do this thing sometimes where I just go through each of the songs and have someone tell me a little bit about it, whether it's like, lyrics, arrangements, song title, where it came from, where it fits in, just any kind of remembrance of anything. I kind of tried to do it with new albums, especially because I think it could be interesting pathways for people to get into it. So are you interested in doing that? Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. So Wild Type Droid, we start off with Water with Hands.
It's funny. Water with Hands was, I think, second to last a song that we did. I mean, it was pulled from the jams. The drums are all Kelly from the improvs, and I think it's one of those things where when Greg and I heard it, we were kind of like, it's very different for us. It's so polyrhythmic, and like it has a different feeling to it. It's neither dark nor light. It's kind of like in this interesting nether world. It's almost like a question mark in a way, mood wise for me. And I don't know how to comment on the lyrics. These lyrics are mostly Greg's. But importantly, he also wrote the vocal melody in the verses for this song. And I remember working on that song here, right here in my studio, and I said I went to go pick up some lunch for us,
right? And
there were no vocals in the verse when I left, and when I came back, I heard something as I was opening the door and coming into the kitchen, and I was like, came into the studio, and I was like, play that. Is that the verse? Did you just do that? He's like, yeah, and he played it, and I was just like, my eyes got big.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just like, that is so unique. Like his melodic choices there and rhythmic choices there are really, I didn't see that one coming, and I really liked it. And I just thought it was this really strong opener. It's sort of planting a flag, like, for failure people, this is going to be kind of a different thing.
Right. Yeah. It's got a very different sort of opener, different kind of opener than maybe one would expect, but strong nonetheless. And then next up is Headstand.
I almost wanted those to be flipped, but Greg stood his ground on that one, and I was like, yeah, you're probably right. But that's Headstand is right now probably my favorite song. That one is just so interesting to me how that came about. That the main musical idea is directly from the improvs. In fact, all of the drums and all of the guitar, which is a baritone guitar, are from the improvs, arranged through editing. We didn't have that exact arrangement. It was more of like a series of moments kind of that lasted maybe like 8 or 9 minutes. And so I just kind of went in and grabbed the good bits basically and tried to create an arrangement with it. And it's just a really weird way to work where when you're improvising this stuff, you don't really know what's happening.
Right. Yeah.
That's
why it's improv.
That's why it's improv. But even as it goes by, you're kind of like, you're on to the next thing. Like you have no time to appreciate or judge or editorialize. So we put all of that into a later period, and so that song in particular really is emblematic of that process, where we had no idea what we were doing when the tracks were actually recorded, but through kind of talking about what the arrangement could be and moving a few things around, redoing the bass, still the same notes as from the improv, played better, more in time,
and not for the first time at that moment. Yeah.
right. But it's just amazing to me, because I would say, yes, 40% of the drums, probably the same of the guitar, are from those early sessions.
That is pretty incredible, and it's a very interesting way to work. But yeah, it's nice that you have the ability and the interest in like sifting through things to find that gold, though. I mean, like, it's I can imagine being in a situation where, hey, we recorded all this stuff, never will have the chance to listen to it or have it become anything other than a thing we did. That's there's something to be said there. It's an interesting way to work. It's almost like a collage method to a certain degree, it seems, but it doesn't sound like a collage.
Yeah, well, in the end, I mean, maybe we would have gotten to the same place if we had done it more in a standard method. I don't know. It's hard to say. I don't think so, though. I don't like to repeat the methodology exactly from album to album. I think it's stifling and creates boredom, and that leads to mediocrity usually. So I'm really into mixing it up and not doing, especially don't do what you just did on the previous record.
No, I can tell. I mean, it comes through. It comes through. Lifetime of Joy is after that one.
That is a straight lift. Everything is from the improvs. Don't remember a thing about playing or singing that. Just nothing. I mean, but I really like that one because it again kind of plants this flag that you're listening to stuff that is at least somewhat live off the floor,
right?
Or it gives you that impression or illusion, especially where it comes in the record, because originally we had it way later, but then moving it forward kind of it recontextualizes everything after it.
Yeah, and context is everything, right? I mean, especially when you come
sequence is important, because people listen to our albums,
which is fantastic. But then you got to think about it in terms of doing it as an album.
Yeah,
having an experience rather than like making a just disconnected series of singles that have nothing to do with each other. Yeah. So then after that, Submarines.
Trying to remember the story. That's one of the songs on the record that went through a whole, like, just through the ringer in terms of iterations. We knew we had something with the riff, the main intro riff, and the verse in the improv stage, and then the chorus and the bridge came later. And not only did they come later, but the ones that are actually on the record are probably like the 8th or 9th version of different choruses.
Oh man.
Yeah. So it's not like we just puked this record out in the improv. It was
right.
like we created the ingredients or the palette, but the actual cooking was done here later.
Yeah, and that's a good example where having a lot of time can be your friend, right? Like you don't have to rush into a decision necessarily about something and put out something that you regret.
Yeah, there's no artificial schedules with this band. It's like, I mean, our other responsibilities are kind of what create the schedule for the band, basically, you know. And when we feel something is done, we don't have to, you know, oh, it's coming up.
Right.
Although we do occasionally impose like virtual deadlines for ourselves.
I love having a deadline. Like a deadline.
Yeah.
It's great for me because otherwise it's just like, oh yeah, I'll get to that. That's fine.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. There's plenty of time. There's like, oh,
yeah.
wait, it needs to be done with time. Oh, okay, let's do it. Let's actually do it. And also it, for me at least, I don't know if you feel the same way, but it kind of helps me get out of my head about things that I may be like, well, I don't know, maybe it could do this, maybe it's like, no, it's this. Okay, move on. Great.
Well, yeah, because for me, I actually have a really, really hard time letting go of artist records.
Yeah.
That I make. Finishing, calling anything done is, for some reason, it's become harder and harder with every album. Not when I work for other artists, only on my stuff.
Your own stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's, you only get into the apocalypse now when it's you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Bring Back the Sound is after that.
That's like one of two songs on the record that I actually composed more on my own ahead of time and presented them to the band. Greg has a couple like that as well. So it's a nice mix of the sort of raw trio ideas and like composed things where, you know, Bring That Sound, I wrote it on acoustic and most of the lyrics too before I recorded a note, which is actually kind of unusual for me. As soon as I get a riff, I'm like, let's record.
But before you lose it or it becomes mired in mediocrity by the world, or
or I overthink it too much and write, and change it into something that's like too vanilla or something. I don't know, but this time I was like, no, I'm going to compose this. I wanted to prove to myself I could do it, because I think I'd get into kind of an unhealthy habit of using the process of overdubbing on yourself as a songwriting crutch in a way.
Right. Yeah. It's one thing to have it be like, oh, that's his thing. And it's another thing to have it be, that's his crutch. Those are two very different things.
Yeah. True.
Mercury Mouth.
That's another one that had a ton of iterations just on the guitar. Drums. That's what that song sounds like. It could be on The Heart Is a Monster to me.
I could see that.
Yeah. So it's kind of, it's complex harmonically, but like mix wise sonically, it was actually really simple. It's just one bass track, a drum performance, and stereo guitar. No other layers really. Whereas a lot of the other songs start out like that, but by the time they get to the end, there's a few other things happening.
Yeah, other things have been added. I mean, is that always like, is there any kind of internal struggle about that? About, when and where to go minimal versus maximal? When to, when does the adornment mess up the feng shui of the room, so to speak? Right.
I think we're pushing ourselves more and more, and it's showing up on this record in particular. We're airing more towards the minimal now.
Yeah.
Headstand's a really good example of that.
Absolutely. 100%.
And I'm getting that feedback from a lot of people I kind of know and trust too. They're like, hey, thumbs up on the minimalism on this record, dude.
Well, you have a strong record of maximalism, and there's
and density and this is dense, but in a different way, kind of. Yeah, it's not dense with big bar chord distorted guitars.
yeah, there's a certain tonal clarity to it that like it sounds assured, but it doesn't sound like in need of anything else. And it's not like it, again, not like it sounds 100% different or anything along those lines. It's just that it's got a confidence in what it is, which that's one of the things I find so interesting about the writing process of it, of just like, doing it through like just hours and hours and days and days and days of improv. That's fascinating to me, because I think that's, some bands can pull that off, some bands can't. And I think that, you guys are kind of an idea factory, it seems like. So it's more just like, which way do you want to go, which direction you want to go. And ultimately, like, I think the, for lack of a better term, stripped down works on this record when it's stripped down. Like, great. Haven't heard those songs. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, bands are always right. Their one song, right? Their theme. And how close you get to nailing that, I guess, is your better songs. Yeah. So I don't know. I don't want to reinvent the wheel, but I want it to engage people that already know the band.
Yeah, I mean, I think it splits that difference well. So let's talk about the rest of it. How about Undecided? That's the next one.
Oh yeah, that's the other one that I kind of brought in pretty finished. And another one that really explores the two new instruments that we brought into the record and I haven't really discussed, which is baritone guitar and bass 6 guitar.
Which is coming to the attention of the world with this Beatles documentary.
Mm-hmm.
John Lennon plays a lot of bass 6 in it, and it's always been like one of my low-key favorite kind of obscure instruments that are guitar shaped.
Yeah.
But that low end, that middle and low end that happens, but it's like, is that a bass? No, I don't think that's a bass.
It blurs the line between what bass does, kind of, or what it can do. I think this bass 6 appears on 3 songs. The baritone appears on like 6 songs. Greg really latched onto it. It's like we're buying 2 new ones right now, basically. It's a part of the band's sound now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you're keeping the baritone guitar industry.
Yeah, going. Yeah,
going. Thanks, Kevin. But it features heavily, but it's also, it's a unique sound. Like, there are bands that have, obviously have used baritones, like, Silkworm's a great example. I think even Sleater-Kinney, I think, played. But it's a good instrument like any other. It's not like there's like the baritone sound, but then by the same token, the tonality of it's unique. There's not a lot of bands that do that, right? So
it has some certain characteristics to it that are unique, I think, where you play the same note on a baritone in the same octave as on a 6-string guitar. Sometimes there's extra harmonics on the baritone. It's almost like it's not really supposed to be there, but it just is because of the scale, the way it works, especially on the G string. It's not the G string on the baritone. The baritone, different tune. I forget, but
B. A? No, B. No, actually, wait, it'd be F. I don't remember.
Well, the low string for us is A flat,
right?
And then it's tuned like a normal baritone after that, like in 5th. So I forget what the G string on a guitar would actually be, but my point is this.
Yeah, no,
that note has a high octave harmonic on it on a baritone, or at least on the 2 that I have. And it's a thing. It almost sounds like Asian in a way.
Yeah, it's got that kind of very specific sort of it's not chime exactly, but it just
the way it's like there's a really intense attack, and then it kind of goes down, but then it does sustain in its own kind of wobbly way because the strings are longer. We just really appreciated the way single note sustaining sounded on the baritone. They sound different than on a Les Paul or a Strat or a
It
six
almost
string.
sounds like it's got a guitar pedal on it or something, but it's like, no, that's just how that sounds. It sounds
It's like this. I think the string is moving more because it's longer.
that. Yeah, that's probably
Like just a little bit more. So you hit one note, and if you have some cool effects on it, that one note can mean a lot, and can kind of tell a whole little story.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's very well said. I'm a fan of that. Wait a second. So we did Long Division. Long Division's up next.
Long Division, to me, and I know it probably doesn't come off to most people this way, but to me that song is like a love letter to The Cure's Disintegration album,
which is the record I was attempting and failing to think of when we referenced The Cure way early on. I was like, I can picture the album cover, but I'm like, the mid period.
Yeah.
Which it isn't even mid period anymore. I mean, that's like way early. But anyway,
I guess, yeah, it is, yeah.
Yeah. So Disintegrate, totally. Yeah,
I made a concerted effort, or I just got right back into The Cure when we were starting to write for this album. I was listening to all those albums all the time. Head on the Door, Disintegration, Pornography, The Top.
Yeah, underrated record.
Oh my God, that record is insane. I mean, that record is just mind-blowing. And so I had a lot of that going through me when we stumbled upon the riff for Long Division.
It's got that feel, but it sounds like you guys, but it's got that feel. It's got that density, which is interesting.
And that tempo kind of that slow kind of like 80 BPM thing they were into during that period.
Just not in a hurry to get anywhere, but doing
just like languid in like minute and a half intros and.
That's you're speaking my language, my dude. That's good stuff. And it comes across without being overly referential. I mean, it still sounds like you guys, so that's good. Bad translation.
Well, if they're going from The Cure to Slint on this one is interesting because there was only 4 bars of it in the improv, and every time it went by, I would just be like, why didn't Slint keep playing and finish that song?
Right. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
And so I think for me, I was just trying to finish it the way I thought they might, at least musically, and then lyrically and vocally, that was more Greg's not very Slinty contribution.
Right. Yeah. That's the. But it would be. I mean, there was a cottage industry of bands that tried to do that for a certain amount of time, which, yeah, no names mentioned, but like, some of it's great, some of it maybe hasn't aged that well. Which leads us to last song, Half Moon.
So yeah, I think on the 3 rebooted failure records we have now, this being the 3rd, Wild Type Droid, Greg has always presented a song during the recording process that is just like amazing, but it also only seems to work as the last song.
No, totally, I get it. Yeah.
But it's like it could only be the last song, but like none of the other songs really work as the last song either. Yeah. We didn't really have a last song, so it was just fortuitous that he presented that. And I don't know. I think it's one of his best songs ever.
Yeah, it's a good one. And again, strong opener, strong ender, and not necessarily the way that people might expect, but it's what's the point of repeating yourself, right? I mean, that's kind of the whole deal.
Yep.
So last thing on it, of course, that we just went through, Wild Type Droid, available, failureband.bandcamp.com if you haven't already picked it up. The Beeple artwork, which I love.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, when the dawn of the NFTs, which there was like it was like millions, like tens of millions of dollars that like was a Beeple artwork. I think there was an NFT.
Yeah.
I mean, I love that image. I think that image is great. I think it fits with the sort of like, pseudo spaceman, space imagery kind of thing, but it has a different sort of feel to it. What spoke to you about that image as the record cover? Like,
I mean, to be honest, I liked it when I saw it, but it was Greg that was just like, that's the cover. I don't want to talk about it anymore. And he was just like, that's it.
Fair enough.
If you have something better, I'll look at it. But this is going to be the cover. Okay. Sometimes if someone feels that strongly, you're just like, okay.
Yeah, but what do you say? What do you say to that?
It's like, I like it.
Yeah, it's awesome.
It's awesome. Let's do it. Done. No, but I dig it. It kind of is. I don't know. There's just something about it that sort of sums up this particular album lyrically. There's a lot of reference. Yeah, it fits. It just maybe better than a lot of our other covers in a way.
I think it's an awesome record, and I'm so glad you came on to talk about it and everything else, Ken. And thank you for being so generous with your time. The last thing that I do on the show, it's the only Can question I ever ask. You can choose to interpret it however you like, but why do you do what you do?
Why do I do? Number one, I enjoy it. And number two, I don't know what else I would do. Honestly, it just feels right. It feels natural, and I've been doing it for so long now and had so many ups and downs, and it never occurred to me to change. It's just like, nope, this is it. I love recording. That's my happy place for sure.
And you have a YouTube page where people can learn all about it, and it's one of the few things worth watching on YouTube, I think, except for this show, of course. Ken Andrews, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Take care.
Okay, bye.
Oh, there he goes, Mr. Ken Andrews. Let's hear Headstand. Thanks for listening, everybody.
You my head over and over again. You played yourself to death in me. Thought I'd drop you easily, but that was not to be. You burrowed like a summer tick, so you invade my sleep and confuse my dreams. Turn my nights to sleepless-ish. Stuck on you till the end of time. I'm too tired to find your rhyme. Stuck on you till the end of time. You've got me paralyzed. Holding on the telephone, I hear your mid-range moan. You're everywhere inside my room. Even when I'm alone, I hear your melody. You're everywhere inside of me. Stuck on you till the end of time. I'm too tired to find your rhyme. Stuck on you till the end of time. You've got me trapped, I can't escape. You're incessant wine. When you beam it out all across the sky. No, I can't escape. You're insanely right. When you shoot it deep, straight into my
Stuck on You, Failure. That's off of Fantastic Planet. And before that, we had one off the new one. I didn't realize that Star Wars / Disney was litigious about the word droid. That's really bizarre to
Can you
me.
hear me now?
But yeah, Wild Type Droid is the name of that record. Available at the time of me speaking these words on Bandcamp, failureband.bandcamp.com. Go get it. Celebrate Bandcamp Day. If you're hearing this later, you can still get it.
Are we going?
It's cool, and that featured Mr. Ken Andrews. That was a good time. I hope you guys enjoyed that. The name of the show is Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. Thank you very much for listening to it.
Can you hear me now?
You can find the show Thursdays, 8 Eastern, 7 Central, 6 Mountain, 5 Pacific on RadioNope.com.
As we come to the close of our broadcast day,
Also streaming YouTube, Twitch, Facebook when I feel like it. ProtonicReversal.com for the archives.
this is my farewell transmission.
Always free, no ads, no sponsors, no kidding. If you like the show and want to get episodes sooner, $1 a month at patreon.com/.
Mr.
Protonic Reversal
all ships at sea.
will achieve that goal.
Anyone within the sound of my voice.
Thanks for people liking, subscribing to the show, sharing the episodes around. All that helps people find it. And what's this darn nice thing to do, isn't it?
50,000 watts of power.
More cool stuff coming up. William Goldsmith, Same Day Real Estate, and the Foo Fighters.
The air.
Fleta, Jawbox, Jesse Broderick, freaking Godflesh, Jesu. Thanks so much for watching, listening. Thanks for being a part of the show.
Turn sound into electricity.
Stay safe out there.
Can you hear me now? Out on Route 128.
And take it easy.
You're dark and lonely. I got my radio on. Can you hear me now? 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 See the radio. And that snare drum and that drum roll means we've got a winner. If you're the fifth caller, or any caller at all, welcome to my top 10. I'd like to thank our sponsor. But we haven't got a sponsor. Not if you were the last man on earth. She was prepared to prove it. This one goes out to a special girl. But there is no special girl. It's the end of radio. The last announcer plays the last record. The last what? Leaves the transmitter. Circles the globe in search of a listener. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Is it really broadcasting if there's no one there to receive? It's the end of radio. As we come to the close of our broadcast day, radio. Can you hear me now? This is a test! If this had been a real emergency,